Chapter 14, the Third Philippine Republic. For today's discussion, we're going to tackle the following. Let's proceed to the Philippine independence. The Philippine independence was inaugurated on July 4, 1946, with the audience of 300,000, including the representatives of 27 countries. The United States officials such as General Douglas MacArthur, Senator Millard Tydings, Representative Jasper Bell, former Governor-Generals of the Philippines, and others. President Ross was thankful not only to the Filipino heroes but also to the Americans, especially Douglas MacArthur, who fought for the Philippine independence. The Ross administration. President Ross was the last Commonwealth president and the first president of the Philippine Republic. In general, President Ross was the fifth president of the Philippines. He also attended the task of rebuilding the war-ravaged country and inauguration of the Philippine independence. President Ross also signed the USRP Treaty on General Relations. USRP Treaty on General Relations relinquished U.S. sovereignty over the Philippines and recognized the independence of the Republic of the Philippines. He also re-established the Philippine Congress and Senate. And after visiting the United States, President Ross enjoined the Congress and Senate to pass the two laws that were approved by the U.S. Congress on April 1946. The two laws are the Philippine Rehabilitation Act or the Tydings Act. Tydings Act is a law passed by the Congress of the U.S. on March 24, 1934, granting administrative autonomy to the Philippines for a 10-year transitional period prior to independence. The second one is the Philippine Trade Act or the Bell Act. Bell Act is an act passed by the U.S. Congress specifying the economic conditions governing the emergence of the Republic of the Philippines from U.S. rule. The act included controversial provisions that tied the Philippine economy to that of the United States. In Rojas' administration, American investors and companies were allowed to own as much as 100 of the corporations in such sectors as natural resources and public utilities. He also led reviving the country's agriculture and industry, reconstructing, reconstructing bridges and roads, communication facilities and free transport, and resurrecting commerce and trade. He also signed the USRP Military Base Agreement in 1947. This treaty officially allowed the U.S. to establish, maintain, and operate air and naval bases in the country to provide for about 23 listed bases and utilities for use by Americans for a period of 99 years. And in 1947, the Military Assistance Agreement created the Joint U.S. Military Assistant Group, or what do you call JUSMA. This is to advise and assist with train and equip requirements of the armed forces of the Philippines. The Quirino administration. After President Manuel Ross died in Clark Irby's Pampanga in 1948 due to heart attack, Elpidio Quirino took over and finished his term, and served again after he won in 1949 elections over Jose P. Laurel. President Quirino attended the socio-economic crisis affecting the country. On his term, the economic crisis worsened due to the depletion of the country's dollar reserves. And the Communist Party of the Philippines was already waging an armed struggle against the U.S. government. The Quirino administration did not focus on a program for natural industrialization. He also signed the Quirino-Foster Agreement. President Elpidio Quirino and Honorable William C. Foster have agreed to recommend to their respective governments a program covering the nature and form of the assistance of the cooperation which the government of the United States would have extended to the government of the Philippines to assist the latter in the solution of the age-old social and economic problems gravely aggravated by the last war, and to bring about a new Philippine era of progress and plenty. The government also entered the government also entered into an agreement for economic and technical cooperation. President Quirino also signed the USRP Mutual Defense Treaty. The Mutual Defense Treaty is the agreement between United States and the Philippines agreeing to come to each other's defense against an armed attack. President Quirino also removed the writ of habeas corpus. Habeas corpus is the recourse in law through which a person can report an unlawful detention or imprisonment to the court and request that the court order the custodian of the person, usually a prison official, to bring the prisoner to the court to determine whether the detention is lawful. Quirino also sent Filipino soldiers to support the U.S. in its war against Korea. The Magsaysay administration. President Ramon Magsaysay was the third president of the Republic after winning over Elpidio Quirino in 1953 elections. President Magsaysay is loved by many Filipinos when he wore barong Tagalog in his inauguration. He was then called Mambo Magsaysay. He also serves basi instead of imported wine to the foreign guests. President Magsaysay also held cabinet meetings in various and provinces, and during his term, armed revolutionary was defeated. He was successfully crushed the Hukbong Mapagpalaya ng Bayan or HMB in 1950. President Magsaysay also proposed the Anti-Submersion Act. He also signed a law guaranteeing the tenants' rights to the land they tilled. Magsaysay also credited for having strengthened the USRP relations. The president also signed the Laurel-Langley Agreement in 1954. The Laurel-Langley Agreement was the trade agreement signed in 1955 between the United States and its former colony, the Philippines. It expired in 1974. It was an amendment to the Bell Act trade, which gave full parity rights to the American citizens and businesses. And what is parity rights? It is a constitution allowing U.S. citizens equal rights with Filipino in the exploitation of natural resources and operation of public utilities. Nonetheless, some powerful Filipinos involved in the negotiations stood to benefit from the arrangement. The Garcia administration. Garcia took over after President Magsaysay died in a plane crash on March 1957. He imposed on foreign payments to ensure that the country can keep on importing production inputs and other essential goods, and to limit the importation of consumer and luxury items. He also implemented the Filipino First policy. The policy dictates that Filipinos would have preference over non-Filipinos in receiving foreign exchange. In line with the policy, Garcia pledged that this administration would assist Filipino entrepreneurs to make ventures in industries dominated by non-Filipinos. The policy encouraged more active participation of Filipinos like the shoemaker of Marikina in business and commerce. President Garcia spearheaded what is termed as golden age of the Philippine industrialization. The Macapagal administration. In the November 1961 elections, Diosdado Macapagal won as president with his party mate Manuel Pilaes as the vice president. The Macapagal administration promised that the five-year economic program would propel the Philippines to a new era. He also featured the control, or the removal of controls earlier instituted by Garcia for the country to save dollar. Because of the decontrol program, small factories that bloomed during the time of Filipino First policy were inundated by competition. Dollars were depleted as soon that President Macapagal immediately resorted to securing foreign loans from international financial institutions. He also implemented the peso devaluation that brought down foreign exchange rate from from 2 peso is equivalent to $1 to 3 pesos and 90 centavos is equivalent to $1. President Macapagal agreed to remove controls on foreign capital, intensifying the export-import character of the Philippine economy, and to that effort at national industrialization. In early 1940s, the US established the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank to encourage countries under their influence to borrow funds and build infrastructures needed for export productions. And Macapagal was the first Filipino president to have entered the IMF WB program. Macapagal administration also implemented the Agricultural Land Reform Code na naglalayong magbigyan ng sariling lupang sakahan ang mga magsasaka sa pamamagitan ng pag-aalis ng pag-uupa kapalit ng pabibigay ng 25% na ani nito. The Marcos administration. Because the mass remained poor and nothing came out of Macapagal's promise of new era, his popularity dipped so low that Ferdinand Marcos defeated him in 1965 elections. President Marcos declared, "This nation will be great again." He impressed the populace during his first term leading. With its thrifty spending, complaint against smuggling and graft and corruption, efforts to address criminality and raising palay and corn production. He also removed some of the government restrictions on trips on Red China and other communist countries. He also excelled in arguing the people to sacrifice in order to make the nation great again. He also signed the Investment Act in preparation to the forthcoming termination of the Laurel-Langley Agreement and parity rights in 1967. The Investment Act guaranteed not only the foreign investors' rights to own the properties, but also their rights against expropriation. Marcos Investment Act considered as Filipino those corporations with maximum of 40% foreign share. And in 1969 elections, Marcos managed to win again, but this had an enormous effect in the country and the people.